So, I want to share with you some information about our own watershed. We talked about how we have everybody has a watershed, right? So, what I have here is the map of the DFW area. Now, we're here in Texas. We have lots of rivers that cross through the state, and most of them, their destination is the Gulf of Mexico, down near Houston, Gulfport, all those areas down there. Texas only has one what's considered to be natural lake, and that is Caddo Lake, which is really technically just a wetlands. It's very shallow, but it's massive. So while that's a good one, it actually is. It actually is the only natural lake we have in Texas. So when people settled here in Texas, they had to figure out how to hold on to the water because it just flows and went straight. Anytime it rained or whatever, there would be water available, but it would go directly downstream. So catching water and holding on to it became really, really important. So what they did was they started building dams and consequently reservoirs. So I'm just going to point out a couple of these to you. Here's Dallas here, right? Dallas, right here. And Dallas actually, if you'll notice, the Trinity River, the Elm Fork of the Trinity River actually runs right down through this direction. Okay, so that's kind of how the Elm Fork runs. Now there's another one over here called the West Fork, and it eventually joins up. And then you have the East Fork, and then there is the Clear Fork, which is over this way. All right, so all of those are parts of the Trinity River. Now they all start in with different waterheads, but they all end up flowing into this main section right over here. So what they did was they began to dam it up in places. And so this one right here, the dam for this one is Louisville Lake. So there's Louisville Lake here. This one above it is called Ray Roberts, and it's north of Denton. And Ray Roberts is a fairly new reservoir. It's only, 25 years old, which is fairly new. Whereas Lake Louisville was dammed up in the 1950s. Actually, it was a little bit older than that. It was called Lake Dallas, and then they changed it to Louisville. Now, they named all the reservoirs after the towns where the dams are, or sort of true. All right, Grapevine Lake is right here. So that's also a dam off of one of the tributaries of the Trinity. So it will work its way down here, and you can see that it snakes kind of up that way. So it's not on one of the main forks, it's on one of the branches of that. There are a couple others. There's Lake Lavon right here, and there's another one here that I can't remember the name of. And then there's Cedar Hill down here. Joe Pool Lake is around in that area. There's also a couple of large ones here. There's Cedar Creek Lake over here, and then there's a couple more. They are in the process right now of damming another one up, building a dam and a reservoir up in this area right here. Drove past it during spring break, and you could see the massive amounts of work that they're doing. Now, almost all of these reservoirs that I pointed out to you are meant to feed into the city of Dallas. So Louisville, though it is named Lake Louisville, the water that's in it is actually owned by the city of Dallas. So as a resident of Louisville, we buy our water from the city of Dallas. We have to purchase it out of that lake. Now, most of you in Flower Mound, your water is coming from Grapevine. I believe Grapevine is also a Dallas water resource, but it could go toward Fort Worth. So Fort Worth has several reservoirs as well. They have Benbrook Lake, which is right down here. They have Eagle Mountain right up here. And if you'll notice, there's Bridgeport off over here as well. And all of those are off of the West Fork of the Trinity. So what this means is that we pull out of each one of these reservoirs for our drinking water. So most of you, I think, when you think about the water that you have at your disposal, most of you think about, like Grapevine, for example, as being a place where you can boat and water ski and all those kinds of things. But it is primarily for drinking water. That is the whole main resource for having dammed that up. That's one thing. All right, so we have, let me see if I can come back over here to my document. All right, so let's do this. Let's say, change color. All right, why is it not working? Okay. What do we use? Why do we have dams and reservoirs? So the first reason is because we need water for drinking. So we have drinking water. The other thing that we use these large reservoirs for is flood control. Flood control. So back in the early 1900s, the city of Dallas and the city of Fort Worth both faced massive amounts of floods. So what they did was they began to dam up the river to control the amount of water that leaves from those reservoirs and makes their way downstream. If you'll notice, down in Dallas, there is a section down here that, let me pull that up one more time, that is meant, is in a floodplain. They're putting a park in there right now. Let's see if I can get that to go. So it's all in this area right in here, okay? So there's very little construction that goes in there, and there are bridges that cross in various places. That area flooded dramatically. Fort Worth as well has a floodplain in this area right here, and it flooded dramatically as well. So what they can do with these reservoirs is they can slowly release the water as it comes out. So a couple of years ago, when we had our massive amounts of rain in May, so if you'll remember, we had lots and lots of rain that May. It rained every day. There was a lot of concern because Ray Roberts up here started to get really, really full and spill out over its banks. So what they wanted to do was they wanted to release the water down this direction. But the problem with that is that Louisville was also getting very, very full and up toward the dam. So before they could do this, it's sort of a little dance they had to do where they had to essentially they couldn't tell Ray Roberts to release water until Louisville was able to receive the water. Well, then Louisville was waiting to see how much water they could send down here, down the Trinity, without flooding the city of Dallas. So it was sort of a little game of chicken to see who was going to be able to go first. And that was the main reason for why that was done. Now, Grapevine also, if you'll recall, had a lot of flooding as well, flooded 2499 in spots and made it unusable. Another concern with Louisville, because this is a massive, massive reservoir, it holds lots and lots of water. The dam began to seem as if it was going to have a breach in it. And this was a huge concern because it's 60 years old. So how do you keep that from being problematic? So the Corps of Engineers, who are the ones who manage all of these lakes in here, Corps, I'm going to put that down there, Corps of Engineers. And they are over almost all of the watersheds around the United States. I have a friend that works for the Corps of Engineers. He's an environmental engineer, by the way. And so he's actually in Germany right now. But so what they had to do was they had to take it over and really look at it and examine it and determine if it would stand, because it's what's considered to be an earthen dam. And all that means is that it is basically, it's not concrete, it is dirt. And what they did, or soil, and they pulled it up from where Leela sits, which is right down in here, and they built the dam from that area, and they just dammed all the earth up. So the concern then is, will it hold? Because if that dam were to be breached and were to let go, all of this area in here would flood. And it's around 140,000 people that would be affected by that damming. So that's one of the big concerns, and that's one of the reasons why reservoirs are so important, particularly in the state of Texas. One is drinking water and having a ready supply, and then the other, and water for other needs. And then the other one is for flood control. Because remember, we have, since we're in the prairie, we have intermittent rain, right? We have seasons of wet and seasons of dry. We have to account for those as we go along. All right, so for drinking water, you guys pull out of Grapevine, and we pull out of Louisville for our drinking water. Now, what they do is they both have, and every city has this, they have water treatment that is specifically to get the water to drinking water standards. And this is, they have lots and lots of tests that they perform on the water. And the one that you guys use out of Grapevine is right there at the dam, the drinking water facility where they purify the water. So they pull the water out of Lake Grapevine. They run it through a big series of purification, make sure it has the right mineral content that it needs, because believe it or not, minerals in the drinking water are really good. So that's not something to be afraid of. And then you guys use it. We all use the water. And then what we have to do is we have to then send the water to a place to be treated. And that's a water treatment facility. So these are two different types of treatment processes that happen, and they're each done specifically. So in my next video, I'm going to talk about water treatment and wastewater treatment and what all is involved in that. There's also a really interesting little place over here. Let's see, it is down in this area right here. And this is a water treatment that is a natural water treatment called John Bunker Sands, or JBS. And what happened was that they had an invasion of zebra mussels up in this area up here, which is Lake Texoma. And so Dallas was pulling, the water was moving, once again, down the river into Lavon. So Lavon was being filled up by about 25% of the water that was being released from Lake Texoma and filling up Lake Lavon, which is right here. Well, with the discovery of the zebra mussels and since they're so invasive, they wanted to stop the spread. So what they had to do was they basically had to cut off the flow of the water from Texoma into Lake Lavon. Well, what this did was it created a water shortage. So with water treatment, what they do is they send that water on downstream, right? So they use it, and then they treat it, and then they send it downstream. So when they realized that this watershed in here had the potential for being affected by zebra mussels, and they had to shut off the water from Texoma, they then had to figure out, how do we make up that difference, that 25% difference? So what they decided to do instead was they wanted to use the wastewater. So they put the John Bunker Sands wetlands up here, and it was owned by the Hunt family. Actually, John Bunker Sands was part of the famous Hunt family of Dallas. So it's a natural wetlands that they put here, and it's really cool. It's it's it it's natural in the terms that it uses the water to treat it. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the next video. But then what they could do is they actually have a pipe. So once the water gets treated in this area, they can actually pipe it back up into Lake Lavon and reuse the water all over again. So it becomes then like a little closed loop. Okay, I'm hoping that this helps you to kind of understand our watershed in the Dallas area. The last thing I want to say about this is that our drinking water here in Dallas is the Dallas area, DFW area, is actually really good. We have high quality water, and part of the reason is because we don't have a lot of industry in Dallas area. We generally have we were built on farmland and all the things that we talked about. So Dallas doesn't have a tremendous amount of industry, particularly in the north area where we are up in here, right? Any of the industry is actually south of Dallas in this area in here. So if there are things like heavy metals or other impurities, they're going to get sent on downstream, which then brings us up to Houston. So the further you move down the watershed, the more accumulation that's going to happen. And it's not just from Dallas. It's as you move downstream, everyone is pulling off of the Trinity and putting the water back into the Trinity. So it's never been known as a particularly clean river. And the more we use it, the more difficult it is. So in some ways, we're kind of lucky that we're up this far in terms of our drinking water and what we have to look out for. Houston, Beaumont, Orange, not so much. All right, hope this helps you. Thanks.